to the work that you all are doing.
This meeting is being recorded.
I've absolutely loved being able to participate. So thank you, everyone who's been involved, for bringing this together, for creating such an informative and engaging series that even a layperson like myself can, really follow along and learn something from the work that you've been doing. I would like to take this moment to remind everybody to please put yourself on mute. Double check that little button, make sure that your microphone is off. We would like to give our speakers our full attention and not provide additional distraction. If you'd like to have your cameras on, you're welcome to. Otherwise, thank you and enjoy the lecture.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor, for your nice words and also very informative information. So that was very nice of you. And also let me give a warm welcome on behalf of the Jagiellonian University. My name is Wojciech Bańczyk. I'm the manager of the American Law Program, known in Polish as Szkoła Prawa Amerykańskiego, taking place in joint effort of the Catholic University of America and the Jagiellonian University for already 22 years, being a part of more than 30-year-long fruitful cooperation of the two universities. This time, I'm very happy to introduce you to the fifth edition of our new series, Contemporary Challenges in American and Global Law, this time devoted to the topic of legal profession. During today's webinar, let me sincerely express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Daniel Zatorski and to Ms. Anna Bluszcz-Balcerowska, who have generously agreed to devote a lot of our precious time to present to you the specificity of the work of the in-house lawyer. Sometimes the work of in-house lawyer is underappreciated and is not commonly regarded as something very challenging, whereas as we were talking a while before the webinar, it's a really very challenging job. It opens the profession of a lawyer to a very different perspective. But that's just a short introduction that will definitely give us information and a lot of interesting facts about their careers and also about the law work of an in-house lawyer in general. Also, I'm very happy to see all the participants here. I'm very excited that you decided to spend this evening with us, and I'm looking forward to undertaking many other common undertakings. In particular, I would like to invite you to participate in the American Law Program or any other endeavors that the Catholic University of America is making together with the University in Krakow. So let me pass the floor to Mr. Daniel Zatorski, who, as I recall, will start the part in merits of our today's meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wojciech. I have to say it fills me with great trepidation to see how many people are attending this webinar. Therefore, to avoid even greater disappointment from the audience, I will try not to exceed my allotted time. Our presentation is described as discussing the American legal practice when performing the profession of an in-house lawyer. And we will structure our presentation in three parts. Firstly, we will talk about the variety of an in-house lawyer's work. Secondly, we will talk about the challenges of an in-house lawyer's work. And finally, we will talk about the utility that the American legal practice brings to the role of an in-house lawyer. So moving on to the first point, the point about the variety of an in-house lawyer's work. Well, it's difficult to generalize the profession of an in-house. If I were to find a common denominator, I would say that an in-house lawyer works with the business. So an in-house lawyer provides support to a specific industry. Therefore, the variety of this role firstly stems from the variety of industries. So I will talk about this variety on the example of the two industries I have worked for. Firstly, the automotive industry. Now, the tasks in the automotive industry are not really just limited to the manufacturing of vehicles. In actuality, the legal tasks involved pertain to everything around the sale of cars. So, for example, the tasks can be marketing related, like negotiating sponsorship contracts with various European football or soccer clubs. The tasks can involve advising a UK distributor on how to properly advertise their vehicles so as not to breach any regulations imposed by the United Kingdom's Advertising Standards Authority. The tasks can also be distribution and sales related. So, for example, they can involve the creation of online terms and conditions for a variety of sales campaigns within the European Union. Or they can involve the creation of an online platform to support car dealers in navigating the complicated COVID-19 regulatory landscape so as to help their businesses stay afloat. And currently I'm involved in a different industry. I'm involved in the commodities trading industry, specializing in liquefied natural gas trading. It's a more specialized industry, but still the variety of tasks is quite substantial. The tasks can range from the drafting and negotiating of hundreds of pages of sales framework contracts for the sale of LNG. LNG, so liquefied natural gas, needs to be transported from one point to another through specialized ships, and therefore the work involves also shipping law advice. And of course, this is a litigious industry. So the task of an in-house lawyer also involves supporting the business in the variety of arbitrations they are involved in. But apart from the variety in industries, there's also variety stemming from internationality. So I've had the good fortune of working for companies that operate on an international scale. And work, from my experience, work on a global scale means that wherever the business goes, the legal department must follow. And thanks to this, one works with parties from various jurisdictions with various legal cultures, but also one works in a multicultural environment with a variety of people. And this in itself is a very rewarding experience from my point of view, because it not just teaches you about the various legal cultures, but also helps you develop substantial people skills. So in a nutshell, that is about the variety. And before I go to the next point, I will hand the floor over to Anna to talk about her experiences.
Hello, good evening. And I'm very grateful for you that you joined this call and would like to spend this evening with us. From my perspective, as I started I started my career with working with Allen & Overy as a very young lawyer, dealing mostly with proofreading of translations and due diligence. And when I moved to Komarch, that is IT company, kind of a software house, but at that moment was rather Polish company that just grew in the next 10 days after I joined. Being internal lawyer gives you an opportunity to work very close with business and to learn more about how the things goes and also what is the result of your work. So you see that in how it materialize. And it is very rewarding, I think. So when you then see it in life. And it is also a very important part of what I am doing now, as I am working at BP. And when I joined, after a few years, I had an impression that this company would just shrink and can disappear from the market. And then all these things around energy transition happened, and you need to follow how the business changes, and you need to learn new things and need to enter new fields. And from this perspective, it is also great to be able to see it at the global scale and to work in an entity that is present in so many countries and in so many markets. And it also gives you an opportunity to work with people from other countries and from other cultures. And I think that what is also good to work as an in-house is that you get a transferable skills that you can use in one industry and then transfer it to the other. And so it opens your mind. And when you change, you learn so much that you grow very rapidly after such move as you, Daniel, also did, like moving from Moto to this LNG. I think that it was a great moment of learning and very fast growing curve. So I absolutely agree with all your remarks and with all your impression around being an in-house.
Well, thank you, Anna. And of course, it's a huge variety. It's a great learning experience, but it's not just sunshine and flowers, which brings me actually to our second point, which are the challenges that an in-house lawyer faces. Because with variety come challenges. This is due to the fact that since you're working in a specific business and so close to that business, you work with non-lawyers. And this in itself is a challenge. Firstly and foremost, you need to set up a framework for cooperation. In other words, you need to ensure that your commercial colleagues know when to approach a lawyer. And sometimes this means that you need to train them. Sometimes this means that you need to set up a formal business process. But even if you have that, your commercial colleagues will not present clear legal questions to you. To the contrary, it is your task to decipher what the question actually is and what your commercial colleagues actually need. And once you have a solution, it's also your task to translate the law to a more human language. And if the need arises, it's also your task to approach outside counsel for advice. And as to this last point, when much is expected of you, you must also understand when you are out of your depth. So in other words, know your limits. Know when to engage outside counsel. I once had the unexpected and surprising issue in my previous role, namely our UK distributor, a vehicle distributor, had a problem with squatters, so with homeless, who occupied one of their commercial premises. Now, squatters in London are afforded certain protections under the law. This means that eviction is a formalized and step-by-step process. Now, obviously, I did not know what this process was, and therefore outside advice was absolutely crucial in this case. And now, as I said, my job is slightly more specialized, but even in such circumstances, outside support is absolutely necessary. A typical example maybe would be specialized clauses in so-called advice on specialized clauses in so-called charter parties. Charter parties are contracts for the use of a ship. So it's a very also specialized sort of advice. So indeed, as I said, with this variety come challenges, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more from your experience, Anna.
Yeah, so this working very closely with business, it makes it very difficult to push back, because people from business usually think that we can write better. And then we are used to write things that we should not do as a legal, and that are more business than legal. And it is something what I find very difficult. And also, on one hand, it is rewarding, but on the other hand, it is difficult how to deal with external lawyers, because on one hand, it is an opportunity to use the best specialists on the market in case you have this very specific questions. On the other hand, it is very difficult to decide when to give up and when not to get into such details and provide the advice by yourself, and how also to manage their budgets and how to agree on fees. All these things brings additional challenges. And if you think about variety, on one hand, it is great to have such opportunity. Last year, for instance, I had M&A project. BP looked at the Polish offshore wind market. That was absolutely new for me. And I was involved in a project in London on leasing vehicles together with charging and insurance. So many different things that on one hand, it was great and brought a lot of interesting things, but on the other hand, jumping from one field to the other brings additional challenges. And when we think about this very close relation with business, it is that we are overused. And I think that you have a great example about how to deal with this legal knowledge, how to present it, and how to write things and how to analyze them.
Well, yes, indeed.
How to utilize our experience and education. Yeah.
Precisely. That actually brings me to our third and final point. Okay, we talked about the background, about the variety, about the challenges, about the good sides and the challenging sides. But now the question arises: is there any utility to American legal practice, to the role of an in-house lawyer? Now, my role here as a participant of CUA's LLM program is to say something positive about it, and so I shall. From my experience, the utility of the American approach cannot be undervalued. And in many circumstances, it is far more superior to the continental approach. Firstly, the American approach is more practice-oriented. Now, I always admired the approach in the US, which essentially said that a lawyer is not really a person who knows the law by heart. A lawyer is more of a skill set. Now, I know that this is a concept that is alien at Polish universities, but there is something to be said for the notion that it is more important for a lawyer to have a methodology rather than to have all the statutes in their head. So that's one. Secondly, the American approach puts an emphasis on how one should identify a problem. Now, as I said previously, identifying a problem is of key importance in this role. And therefore, the skill of identifying a problem is key. And I feel that I truly firstly learned this in the American law program's negotiation workshop, where basic techniques of information gathering were presented to us. The most important being quite simply listening. Now, is listening a skill that is limited only to lawyers? No. But is it a skill that all lawyers should know? I'd argue yes. And thirdly, and finally, the American approach also gave me that to which Anna alluded to, the tools to tackle a problem. Now, any lawyer, including an in-house lawyer, should be able to structure a solution to a legal problem. And here I think the most important lesson comes in, and this lesson is called IRAC. Now, IRAC is an abbreviation. It stands for Issue, Rule, Application, Conclusion. This is just a legal writing tool. IRAC is essentially a roadmap of how you should structure your thoughts in writing. So you should first set out what the issue is. Secondly, what the applicable legal rule is. Then you apply the rule to the facts and you conclude. And this very simple structure helps to make a piece of writing easy to read. And it essentially helps your work. Now, certainly you have seen many chaotic, badly written pieces of legal advice, legal memos, persuasive legal writing. But if you can make your own piece of written work concise, clear, then it will certainly stand out. And this is why this particular legal tool is something that I use on a daily basis. And this is why I believe this is one of the most important tools in the toolkit of a lawyer. I don't know what your experience here might be, Anna.
Yeah, so I really think that this very precise expression of solution and very precise way of writing is the crucial part of this transferable skills. So I think that the detailed reading with understanding, active listening at the moment when you need to understand the issue, and then when you need to provide an advice, doing it in a way how you present it is the best, I think. And also, what I still think I have a gap, but I didn't graduate LLM, I didn't even do the American law program, I just participated in this short summer law program because none of the longer one were available when I graduated. I think that it is a great opportunity to learn in legal English that I really miss until now, I think, because I'm not so able to draft in a very great way for English lawyers. So I can do it when I negotiate with colleagues from Netherlands, when I work with Germans. But if you get to the field of UK and America, I think that the pure legal English and really drafting skills, it's something what this course is give you an opportunity to learn and from really American professors, etc. So it is a great opportunity to fill this gap, I think. And yeah. And this transferable skills, yeah, it's really something important. And I think it is something what allows you to transfer from one business to the others, because all of us can read and understand the provisions of law. And it is then the way how we understand them and how we use them in practice is the most crucial part of the work that we are doing, I think.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think with that, we can wrap up this this more formalized presentation and move on to the less formal part. So I guess we will hand the floor back to you, Wojciech, or to questions. I don't know how you would like to structure this.
Thank you very much to both of you for your presentation. Unfortunately, Mr. Brian Webster, who's supposed to be the third speaker due to his professional emergency, didn't manage to join us today, for which he was very sorry about. But we can imagine that the presentations that you have heard were definitely much more than enough to get the grasp of the topic from many different perspectives, working in the international environment, being available to Polish lawyers. So the question is whether you have any questions to our speakers. If not, I do have a lot of them, but I think well, it should be rather the audience to ask them. And I hope that the presentation inspired you to discuss some issues of both professional experience and practical background. So I don't see questions, so maybe I could start with the first one. So for me, it's quite interesting to see how really this connection of your legal and business background, and also legal and partly business expertise look like. To what extent, how can you differentiate the scope of advice that you are giving, saying, well, that's no longer a legal issue? Because definitely you have a great knowledge about the business you are working with, and probably sometimes you could make some business decisions as well, but that's not really, as I believe, your job. So to what extent, even if you have the business experience and you know how things work economically also in the tasks that you do, how can you say stop at a certain moment, as I believe you do, if not tell us about it, that it's no longer a legal issue, that should be your decision. How to stop making legal advice when it's no longer a legal issue, if that's so much interconnected with business.
Well, it's actually a very fine line. And I think there is no one-size-fits-all answer here. But if I were to find some kind of rule of thumb as to putting a border when a legal problem stops being a legal problem and starts being a business problem, I would say that if I feel that my commercial colleagues are properly informed about the ramifications of legal ramifications of a certain decision, then I feel that I have done my job. I think a good example might be clauses on liability. Liability is a very legal, a very important legal concept, and it's a very always a very important clause in a contract. But of course, the ultimate decision on whether to accept risks associated with liability is on the business, and it's the lawyer's role to inform the business how a clause on liability might work in practice. What kind of risks are they opening themselves up, and what kind of risks do they want to limit? So all in all, it's a very fine line that an in-house lawyer treads, and sometimes you just have to you just have to know whether you have properly informed them about the ramifications a business decision might carry with it.
So this liability clause is a great example, I think, because it comes up every time when you negotiate a bigger contracts. And I never touch numbers. It is something what I always step back. So in case there is a cap, I never get to the details about numbers and push back very hard on that, because business always wants us to decide. And it is very important to explain how it works and what is the result of what they agreed on. And there are also some standards that we have in our company. So it is always a kind of time of a frame that I'm looking. So if we need to have it this way or that, sometimes it's very precisely defined. Then you also need to get into those details about who can agree within the company on the specific clauses. So who has a proper authorization to agree on some things. To be honest, personally, it also sometimes depends on how close you are with the relevant business person. So it is that also it depends on if they are new within the company, if they have sufficient experience, knowledge. So it is very fluid sometimes. So sometimes I get much more involved than in the other situations when there is someone who is really longer and properly understand what is going on and what is the result. Yeah, so it isn't, I would never say that I have the same template for everyone and for every situation.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. In the meantime, we got 2 questions from the audience. So the first one: how do you manage legal risks in a time of crisis, such as now, COVID, war?
So in respect to war, so we had a very specific team within the company who dealt with all the trade sanctions, because it was a huge problem when we were leaving Russia and making a decision on leaving Russia, and with all this energy and fuel coming. So there was a very specific team. There was a very clear guidelines when we need to approach them and what they need to agree on. In respect to COVID, there was also a specific team who was dealing with that on a country and on the Europe basis. We worked 24 hours per day. I don't know how it was for you, Daniel, but it was really a moment when I worked all the time, going into the details of all the new provisions of law, of all the internal rules, all the communications, working with our staff, people on site were working all the time. So also dealing with the strange situation on sites that happened. But it was both situations. It was a moment when we really had to work very, very, very hard, and much harder than in ordinary circumstances.
I absolutely agree with that and echo that. I think COVID was also a very crazy time and very work intense time. And I think all the things we said previously even can be fleshed out very nicely through COVID. Namely, each industry was impacted very differently by COVID. And back then I was working in the automotive sector. And I shortly mentioned this during my presentation, but maybe I'll give a bit more flavor here. Namely, a huge problem for the automotive industry during COVID was that dealerships were having trouble with staying afloat. And obviously, an automotive brand sells cars in various countries. In these countries, there are dealerships, so essentially the stores you go and buy the car at. And they were having trouble. the problem was, of course, that one legal department cannot support all the dealers in each and every country. I mean, I didn't know, for example, what the regulatory framework for combating COVID was in Spain. And even in Poland, it was an immensely complicated framework, which I think was changed substantially and very quickly. So it was very difficult to keep up. And therefore, the idea that we came up with was to create one internet portal for all the dealers. And that portal was divided into jurisdictions. And and for each jurisdiction, there was legal advice included. Now, of course, one legal department wouldn't have been able to deal with that, which is why we, of course, engaged outside an outside firm, which was present in more than several jurisdictions, whose regional offices filled the internet portal with advice for dealers. So the Spanish office provided advice for Spanish dealers, the Polish office for Polish dealers, and so forth. And now, of course, as far as the war is concerned, I can only echo what the business has a very specialized department that follows the sanctions regulations. This is even more difficult because you don't only need to follow European sanctions, but also United States sanctions as well. And here, again, one small department cannot handle that. They also need to rely on outside advice, because it's also a field of law which changes immensely in an immensely rapid fashion, and regardless of whether it changes quickly or not, you have to follow it. So this is why this was also a very work-intense period, especially at the beginning.
Thank you very much for your answers. When you mentioned very intense period during both those conflicts, and this leads us to another question, which asks about something related to the control. So it's really like this, that the work of an in-house lawyer is more predictable and has more regular working hours than in a law firm. Do you have experience working in a law firm, and can you compare it to the in-house lawyer work? So this also, I'm not so sure whether this particular question, but refers to the issue that we had with Polish lawyers working in the United States, who mentioned working like 16 hours a day, every day, including weekends. So probably, is there hope in working with an in-house lawyer that the work-life balance is possible to be ensured in a better way than working in a law firm? How would you tell about this apart from emergency moments?
Yes, so if I compare my experience at the very beginning at Allen & Overy with everything what was going on later, of course, working hours at law firm are unbelievable. And if I am also looking at the law firms that we are working with now, during the M&A projects, for instance, it is the way that we do all the internal work, so all the business consultations, our proofreading internally, we did Monday, Friday, and that Friday late evening, we sent the document to the law firm that we used for this project, and they worked the whole weekend and came back with another version, for instance, on Tuesday. So I think that, yes, it's true that hours are more predictable. I think that it isn't like that I'm working 9 until 5 every day. I work more hours for sure, but it is more predictable than at law firm, I think.
I think that that's the case. I have been in several law firms in the past, but maybe on a more junior level. And of course, a person on a junior level has to stay longer to show all the seniors that they are staying longer, regardless of how much work they are actually doing. But still, I think there is a degree of predictability in the role of an in-house lawyer. There are definitely moments of terror, like if a crisis erupts, if something sudden happens, then of course you have to deal with it regardless of the time. But if I were to generalize, and I cannot generalize every company, and I cannot generalize every law firm, but if you put my feet to fire, then I would say that still an in-house role is more predictable.
Daniel, what is the most crucial is that you do not need to fill the timesheet, and that no one really looks on how much hours you work and if all of them are billable.
Indeed, not a timesheet, but still a sheet of listing your work is still something that is good to have, because when later you go to your boss and say that I'm doing a lot, you at least have something on paper to prove that.
Okay, I'm not doing that, but
I did that, but recently, I think I should be doing that more.
okay.
Thank you very much. So do you have any other questions about the technical aspect of work of an in-house lawyer, as well as the merits and would you recommend starting career as an in-house? Maybe it's better to gain some experience in a law firm first.
I would strongly advise experience in the law firm first. I think that the skills that you gain there are absolutely putting you into the higher level, I think, and also dealing with the stress, you also get a kind of a role model, learning role models, possibilities, having someone who can mentor you somehow. I think it is great to start with a law firm. I don't know how you, Daniel, think.
I think I can echo that, but I would add something. It may be not necessarily always a law firm, but from my experience, something that also pays off is experience in the public sector. So before going in-house, I worked several years for the General Counsel to the State Treasury. This is now called General Counsel to the Republic of Poland. And in Polish, it's called Prokuratoria Generalna Rzeczypospolitej, which is essentially a law firm for the state, or a litigation boutique of the state. And I think the skill set there was also something I can highly recommend, because you would not only learn about the public sector, which is quite often very important when then going in the private sector, but you also get in the public sector a lot of responsibility very quickly, because obviously in a law firm can have an army of people to work on a specific important litigation. The public sector doesn't have that luxury. So I can also recommend the public sector as a starting point as well.
Thank you very much. Also, we have yet another question. How do you choose external lawyers, legal firms? And maybe just to add, we have quite a few professional lawyers in our audience. So you can always consider this as well. But beside it, what's the rule? How you choose then? Do you choose just one law firm for all cases, or maybe different law firms to different cases based on specialization? In general, how it may look like, how lawyers pick up lawyers.
So I don't know, Daniel, if it is a case for you, but we have a kind of a panel law firms that tender at the level of group and that are chosen for at the group level. And sometimes I have to use them. There are some rules that I need to apply. But especially when it is a bigger project and with a huge budget, we need to use them. But if I have a very specific advice for the Polish market, I usually try to do the tender, and it is a limited tender. So I look at who is present on the market and who is recommended, who has a great specialists that are mentioned in all this Legal 500, etc. Surveys. And then we do the tender. We ask them to provide us an offers. We now very much look into diversity and inclusion rules that they apply. So it is one of the points we ask for to get information about how many women are partners, who would be the members of the team, if it is equal, etc. And we, of course, look at the prices. And then we choose from that. Not always price is the most crucial. Sometimes if you see that someone is a great specialist in this specific field that I am looking for, I just choose also the most expensive offer, but because of the specific person who would deal with the case. And it is very important to know who would deal with the case. So the brand of the lawyer is very important for me.
Yes, similarly at Uniper, we also have established panels. I would say that I'm not even required to look for outside counsel when I need them, because I already know who to turn to if I ask within the legal department. On the other hand, my experience in the automotive sector was very different, because here it was up to me to select the law firm. And it really depends where on the piece of advice you're looking for and on the jurisdiction you're looking at. Because, for example, when you're seeking advice in a jurisdiction which you know very little about, and we had that, for example, with Slovenia. I honestly didn't know which law firm would have been best there. So I used the worst possible way of researching, namely the Legal 500. But unfortunately, I didn't know of a better way. But we did, of course, conduct a tender. And I think at least a tender shows some kind of diligence, because you don't just go to one firm, you at least research 3 and select the best offer. Now, what is the best offer? It's very difficult to say. That also depends on the specific field and specific piece of advice you want to receive. But I think since the automotive sector really looks intensely at how much it's spending, I would say that still price was the most important factor there.
Thank you very much for your answers. Do you have any other questions? maybe I would have just one more question. When we were talking before this meeting, you mentioned one issue that sometimes you are asked simply to write things just because it's somehow connected with a legal task. Say that, well, you are lawyers, then therefore you can write, but it's not really a lawyer's job to write things which have basically no connection with a legal task. How to say this to your boss? How to say this to the person who is, for example, above you in the structure, that you can do something, you have the ability, but it's not within your job, and you simply don't feel like being maybe a secretary or something, because it's like there should be, maybe could be some other persons who should do this kind of task.
I have never tried to do it with someone who is above me, you know. So it is something what you usually do with your colleagues, but there are people within the company who you would never say no. So that's how it works. I think that I can say it to my line manager, but I don't think that I can say it to some business people.
I think that also really depends on how the role of an in-house and how the role of a legal department is viewed. Because in some, I think in some industries, it's really viewed in a narrow fashion, namely as a department that only supports on legal matters and nothing more. And in such circumstances, I guess being assertive is the only way forward, by saying that, well, this is more of a business decision, it's not a legal issue. On the other hand, what I at least encountered in my career was that in some cases the legal department is viewed, or views itself, as also an advisor to the business. So not just limited to purely legal issues, but also on how to improve the business on how to improve the functioning of a business, better internal processes, or how to maybe improve sales by through a certain legal solution. So it was sometimes, and in certain businesses, a legal department is viewed in a broader way as an advisor to the business as well. And in that case, you cannot escape such questions.
Thank you. So, our dear audience, any other questions? Actually, there were quite many of them already. Okay, so I think that we have come to an end of our webinar. A little shorter than usually, but also we had. Oh, do you have does an in-house lawyer need to have a license? Or what's the utility of a license that you both have? How it will improve your job, or maybe it doesn't matter? What about you?
I don't think that I would be employed at my position if I do not hold a license. So I think that due to the risk assessment from the company perspective, you are expected to be admitted lawyer to the practice in the country where you are employed. Or you can, of course, be moved within the company without being, for instance, admitted to UK and doing some work at UK. But I don't think I can be employed at my position without being admitted to practice. Of course, we had previously lawyers who were not admitted, but they were let's say, at the lower grades than I do.
Well, then I have to say that my experience is completely different. In none of my roles was, I am admitted, but in none of my roles was admission relevant or even sought. So from my experience, an in-house lawyer doesn't have to hold a license. But I guess this again differs from company to company. And if I understand, I work in Germany, and if I know the law correctly here, an in-house lawyer doesn't enjoy privilege as an outside lawyer like a Rechtsanwalt would enjoy. So here in Germany, having a license as an in-house is even less relevant than it would be in other jurisdictions.
But it really depends on the company. So all my colleagues in Germany, they are Rechtsanwalts, and it is really required. So I think that you see how different it can be.
Absolutely.
Does the candidate need to present language certificates, or are his language skills tested in practice? That's another question from the audience.
We usually test it in practice. But I think that if you can prove it via certificates or via American law program, it is always a benefit.
Yes, I think I haven't seen. Also, I never had to present any sort of certificate, but I do have the American law program and do have an education from the UK, a legal education from the UK. But I think knowledge of English is really tested in the interview. If you can communicate during the interview, and if the people interviewing you hear that you can speak English, it's a fair assumption to make that you know English.
Other practical questions that are asked. So you can see that there is a huge practical interest in a webinar. What about university grades? Are they relevant, checked at the recruiting process? Maybe do you know whether it differs?
I don't think that it is the most important thing. I think that it is more about how the whole CV works and experience. But to be honest, I always look at the grades from university, and it is something what I am interested in, but it isn't the most crucial part. Yeah.
Well, here again, my experience differs completely. Never was I asked for my transcripts, that's one. And never did, when I was on the other side, so the one maybe interviewing or participating in the recruitment process from the employer's side, never did we require transcripts. As far as the recruitment process is concerned, I think more practical aspects were checked. So, of course, there's the first stage, which is just an interview, tell us about yourself, or all these interesting questions you get during an interview. And if there was a second stage, from my experience, it was more a practical exercise that you, for example, get an email from the CEO to prepare something, and then you have to prepare it. But it wasn't really a task aimed at checking whether you're a great lawyer, but whether you're a more business-oriented lawyer, that you have to come up with a creative solution, for example, for selling cars and how to implement it from a legal perspective. So again, this differs from company to company, what they require.
Yeah, and I don't know if you are familiar with, but we at BP have a kind of so-called value-based questions, and you can look for that at internet. So there are different ways of asking the questions, what you expect from the candidates to know. It is very important to know not few sentences, but to get into some details around the company and to learn about the goals, to know what are our aims. And I really think that it is really good to learn more if you apply somewhere, to know about the company. What is interesting, I think that the one of the levels now in the recruitment process is that you need to record yourself. So there is you join the link, there is a question asked, you need to record your answer. And it is a first part of recruitment process within BP. And then there is a kind of this value-based interview where it is expected that your answers refer to practical situations and where you describe how you have solved it, how it influenced the result of the whole issue, and how it works with our values. So it is really good to get into the details about how different companies have this process structured to be able to somehow answer that requirements.
And this is a very formalized process, I would say, and one of the more high level, high-end processes. But in that case, I need to ask one question about the recordings. Does anyone really look at them? I was always wondering when listening to friends who participated in such processes.
Yes, so it is really not everyone is asked to record himself, and HR, and as we have some processes also outsourced to our internal outsourcing center in Budapest, there is a team who looks at it and who then sends to the line manager the best candidates from the pool they asked to record themselves. And there is a question, does this recruitment process include solving law cases? So I think that you have already answered, Daniel, but
yeah, I think it could be, just to maybe add more flavor, because definitely someone is very interested about applying to some companies. I would say that those are more quasi law cases. For example, in the past, I had to draft a contract, but in a very generalized way. It wasn't important. The language of the contract wasn't as important as the solution that I adopted. So I had to think of how to sell cars under a very specific model and how to structure a joint venture. And the structure was more important than the actual joint venture agreement.
Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, so when I was employing, we usually asked the kind of law cases. Sometimes you just get a short contract where you need to pick up what are the mistakes and how you would do it better. When I applied to BP, I got two cases. One was about loyalty program and personal data around it, and some rewards granted. And the other one was about some competition law issues around RPM, etc. But it was not about providing a very specific answer. It was more about giving a hints where you would go and look for provisions and solutions. So it is not about giving very precise answer. Yeah.
Thank you. So we can still see another question from the same person. Definitely very interested in applying to maybe one of your companies. Do your companies work remotely or stick to the office-based model, and how it maybe affect your work as a lawyer? How did it change your work as a lawyer when you moved to, you definitely moved to online for at least a while, I assume. So how it did make your work different, and how much traveling is involved in your work, especially since both your companies and both your jobs seem to be very international, multicultural based.
So we are now working 3 days from the office, 2 days working from home. And it is worldwide approach, so the same everywhere. And now I do not travel a lot. At Comarch, I traveled really a lot. So there were moments where I traveled every week, and around Europe, because I negotiated a lot around Europe, and I traveled every week. So it was a big challenge, to be honest. I had a small kid, and it was very difficult.
Yes, also at Hyundai, I definitely traveled a lot. I think once a week to our UK distributor from Frankfurt. But now, similarly to Anna, I do not travel a lot. There is no need to do that. But unlike Anna, I have greater flexibility in saying when I want to be in the office or not. I don't need to be 3 days a week. That is not expected of me. It's much more flexible. So again, there is no one size fits all. I guess every company differs in this regard.
A lot of information on the most practical issues in your job. Do we have any other questions?
I do encourage that person who asked these questions to apply.
We are very happy that this webinar encouraged someone to really think seriously, at least think seriously, and from the amount of questions and the detailed way, we can really see that very seriously about this career. So
I can only say thank you.
we could start our webinar. So if you would like to summarize and say just a few last words, would be very grateful. And I think we'll be closing it.
I would say all in all, it's the role of an in-house lawyer can definitely be an interesting one, a challenging one, as we have described with Anna. It's a job that has a lot of variety to it. It's a job that has many challenges to it, but definitely the American approach towards law is something that can only be a positive in this job.
So I think that what is the greatest to be a lawyer is that you have so many different possibilities on how you want to work and what exactly you want to do. So you still have all these doors available, and you just need to choose what you want to have and get, and And also to remember that you can change it in meantime, and the skills are the most important, and that they are transferable.
Thank you very much for all your input to this discussion and to our webinar series, for sharing a lot of your professional experience and also lifetime adventures and undertakings that you are doing. So we really appreciate your devotion of time and answering so many questions. And I'm looking forward to seeing both you and all our audience during other undertakings, during other webinars or other undertakings of the Catholic University of America and Legal University. So thank you very much. And in case there are some questions, maybe about the webinar series or the American Law Program, I will stay for a while, but the meeting is closed. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think I will be closing the meeting. So once again, thank you very much and have a good evening. Goodbye.